Hello there, and welcome back to CM4D Basic Training. In this module, we'll be talking about some of the options involved with creating and maintaining sheet sets. So in previous tutorials, we've seen a bit how we can create new sheets, which we've done for some of the other modules where we looked at how to make text boxes, chart annotations, different types of graphs, different types of tables, as well as different graphs like polar charts. So what we're going to do is just expand on how we can make new sheets, new sheet sets, and some of the functions here in the Sheet Set tab. So in this tab, again, you start off with a default sheet set whenever you make a new document called main set. This can be changed, the name, as well as some of the settings about it. For instance, just to illustrate, I'm going to right click here on sheet sets, choose new sheet set. I'll call this new sheet set. And if you notice, there's some options here as well. You can get to these by right clicking on the sheet set name and going to properties. But here you have the sheet set size, which we'll see soon. You can choose particular size, or you can go to custom and choose a particular height and width for the size in millimeters of the sheets within the sheet set. You can also choose the orientation, whether it's landscape or portrait. In fact, let's take a look here. I'm going to click OK. So if I go back to the sheet set, properties, again, I can change the size of the sheet. If I have an object on the sheet, for instance, if I just click and draw a shape, I have a box on the sheet. It's currently at the default size A. If I change this to B and hit OK, it'll grow. The sheet set itself will grow bigger because it's a larger page size. So these are some standard page sizes that we have shown in these options menu. So ANSI A through E, and then ISO A4, A3, A2, A1, and A0. These are based off of some standard paper sizes in US and in Europe that might be good for printing later on. So if you're dealing with a customer and they plan on printing out their CM4D reports on a printer, you can choose the appropriate sheet size beforehand and use that so that everything on the sheet that you create is proportional to the size of the printer plot size that they're going to be using. Of course, you can print any of the sheet set sizes to any printer size, but in general, it's good to choose a particular size beforehand so that the proportion is optimal for your customer. So you have sheet sizes. If I set this to custom, I can make this something custom when it comes to the sheet size, if that's necessary. I can choose the orientation, whether it's landscape or portrait. Let's see here, landscape, portrait. If I go back to a standard sheet size, then again, it will take that effect. If you have this set to custom, this option no longer becomes relevant because you've set exactly what the height and width will be. But if you choose one of the predefined options, then when you choose portrait or landscape, it will orient the sheet lengthwise or widthwise, according to the dimensions of these set options. We have some other options, such as interactive use type. This is for cases where you're setting up a CM4D interactive report. With CM4D Interactive, you'll have a series of pre-made sheet sets that can be accessed through the CM4D Interactive interface. In a different module, we'll talk about CM4D Interactive. But when you see that interface and you click on the drop down for the different chart options that you have for making the auto report, it's based off of how many sheet sets you create in the base document and the type of use. So for report, that allows the particular sheet set and the name to be seen in the drop-down menu, where you select a chart type or a graph type in CM4D Interactive. Summary is also in that drop-down menu, but unlike report, it does not automatically create an auto report to make multiple sheets to display all the graphs for that option. Instead, this is more of a one-page report that will just show whatever summary or statistics you put on the sheet set in the base document. So the difference really is that this does not auto report. And then finally there is the drill down, which makes the sheet set not show up in the top drop down, but instead it will show up if you link to it within one of the annotations on the drill down sheet or the drop down sheet. You'll have an annotation on the page, and if you right click, you would have a list of the drill down reports that you've linked to. So you'll have a sheet set that has the annotation that would be used for the drill down. You link that to the first annotation you access through the drop down menu, and that's how the drill down option works here. It's not shown at the drop down level when you choose your initial chart, but it's shown when you right click on one of the charts created on the white space once the auto report is completed, and then you'll have the options for whatever drill down reports you've created. So again, these are interactive usage types for CM4D Interactive. This row adjust, that's for cases where you have multiple sheets and you want to view the array. The array is a special sheet next to the title sheet, which is also another special sheet. For every sheet set, you'll start off with a title sheet and an array page. The title sheet is where you can put information that will appear on all the other sheets. So if you wanted to set a title block or have a company logo or some information about the report itself, for instance, the report name, I can do something really basic and simple. For instance, if I right click, make a text box, use the variable routine, link this to the query so that it resolves. Now that I have this text box on the title page, it will show up on all the other pages within this sheet set. And it can only be affected, or the objects on the title sheet can only be affected by going to the title sheet. So you have the title sheet where you can put on header information for your entire report. And then the array page, by clicking on this, I can view all the sheets within a set together at once. So that brings us back to this option here, array row adjust. Basically, this is a value that when you have positive values, I believe it can reduce the number of rows that show up. So if I set this to 100, right now we have 4 columns and 2 rows to display the data in this array page. If I set this to, it doesn't have to be 100, it can be 50 or 20, but the bigger the number, the smaller the number of rows created. So I think what this is saying is that you would have 100 sheets going this way in a row before it goes to the next row. So in this case, if I wanted to split this up into 2 rows, I have 4 sheets, then another 4. If I select 4, well, it looks like it doesn't do that in this case. So I have 6 sheets and then 2 here. If I made this 5, then it increments by 1 again. So let's see, if I want it to display 4 pages, perhaps I make this 3. So that's 5 here and 3. So if I make this number smaller again, now at this point it doesn't seem to adjust, so I make that 4. Let's see, so the bigger the number, the more pages will appear on one column, basically. But if I make that a negative number, if I say -4, it will do the opposite effect. It will give me more columns instead of rows. So if you wanted to somehow adjust how the pages appear in the array, you could adjust this number to make it a positive or negative number to affect the number of rows or the number of columns that you see. Okay, so another option here is sheet propagation. This is for special cases where you would have one sheet that would be connected to a particular feature, and you want it to propagate that for multiple features. So for instance, I'm going to copy this histogram sheet onto the new sheet set to illustrate this. So this is the 4th sheet. That's this one. I'm going to right click and choose, well, I'll choose this, duplicate sheet. That'll give it a particular name. I'll call this propagate, and you can call it any name you want. It's just giving a title to the sheet name. And this sheet I can then click and drag down into the next sheet set. So once I do that, if I look down below, I'll see I have 2 tabs. For sheet sets, I can click on the second one and click on array here, and I'd see the 2 sheets. Now, of course, because I have this set as portrait, it's not displaying exactly correctly for the sheet, but of course we can change that. So here, I'm going to double click and choose landscape again, so that it's a better size for this object. So I have the sheet. This other one I'm going to delete. So I'm going to right click and choose delete sheet. And so now if I go to here, I see that I have just the one sheet. So if I go back and use the sheet propagation function, this will create a certain number of sheets with the same name, and the number is based on the total number of sheets you decide here for this option. But if I had a series of different charts all linked to one data set, and these charts have a special option in them, if I go to data source, there's something called sheet sync. I can turn that on. So if I set this to look at row 1, turn this option on sheet sync, and then if I right click, go to properties, and go to sheet propagation, and say make 10 sheets, and the first name will be propagate, or maybe a different name. We'll choose test. If I hit OK, what ends up happening is it creates different sheets here, and each one of the 10 is synced to a particular row of the data set that the object was connected to, because I used the sheet sync option. So those two options work together. The sheet sync for any annotation you have on the sheet, and the sheet propagation option. If you notice here where you don't see the sheet names listed, that's simply a bug in the software. You should see the names. If I clicked on a completely new document and then switched back to the one I was using, I'd see those names appear here. And in this case, it's just using the name of the feature in which the sheet belonged. So it's one method if you wanted to have multiple pages where everything looks the same, the layout is the same for all of multiple annotations that you have on the page, but you wanted to do that for rows in a data set. You could use those options similar to an auto report in order to create multiple sheets to display data for features in whatever data set your annotation is connected to. So this is connected to graph data. It's showing data for first 10 rows in this data set. So then another option is sheet management. This is for when you're setting up a report to be used in CM4D Web or in CM4D Scheduler. So to use a report, first you have to manage the document, but when you do manage the document or the CM4D report, you can decide which of these sheet sets will be available for creating your web report. And you do that with this option where it says managed. When this is turned off, then the particular sheet set will not be available to be used. So for instance, I have this main set. I can turn that off, but keep this new sheet set on. And then if I manage this document, making it a managed document, I can change the name if I want. I can link to where the document should be. So this document is in this folder, and I have to use the UNC path, which means the server name and share drive. Once I save this, when it comes to the Manage Report menu, where I can create my web report, I only have the one sheet set available, not two, where it says new sheet set for this one, but not the main set. However, if I turn this back on, then if I go back to my Manage Report setting and choose New, and then Edit, let's see, Select Documents, that's my training document. I now have both sheet sets available for making a managed web report. So we'll get into this interface later when we look at how to manage documents for CM4D Web and for Scheduler and another module, but here we're just seeing the relation between the ability to see a sheet set when using this function and the option here for managing the document. This other checkbox, Run Auto Report, that's for use by Scheduler when a new PDF is being created by the automation system. With this turned on, if you happen to have a page like this that's using auto report instead of the sheet propagation, which we did here, it will make sure that Scheduler runs the auto report for a sheet set where we don't have a view and graphs going around that view. So it just forces it to run the auto report at the time that the PDF is created. And then finally, if we go to setup, this is for other options for CM4D Web and for report depository. So this is about creating what are known as thumbnails, which would show up in the CM4D Web interface. This area, sheet set thumbnail and report name, those will be implemented in the future for other uses. Right now, they're not really being used by the software. But for the report tag, this is where you can create what's known as a thumbnail picture. So you would create a page that has some sort of picture or graph or summary information and then link to that sheet here in order for a thumbnail to be seen for the report when the PDF is created in CM4D Web. And then if the customer has ways that they want to categorize their created PDFs by using certain types of tags, you can create those tags here by clicking on New and making as many as you need. You can display what the tag name will be, which will show up as a column in CM4D Web. And then the value, it can be something that you hand type, or it can be a variable that gets resolved by any particular data source that you connect it to. So in this way, you can always have a particular column type that's used to organize your PDFs and your reports in CM4D Web. You can type in what the value will always be for this report or have it dynamically change by using a variable and giving it a data source for that variable to resolve, and create as many tags as you want. This would be used if you're doing document level tags for your web reports in CM4D Web. So those are some of the basic options for the sheet set. We can illustrate perhaps some of these. For instance, the report tag feature. If I click here, go to new, I can call this tag test or call it report type. And here the value, I'll type just test. This would always have this value for this report whenever this PDF gets printed. Or I could do here something like part and have here routine label, and here I can have as my report source just the query. So if I do something like that, then hit OK and hit save. If I do create a new managed report for this, then in CM4D Web, I would see two columns based on what I created. I'd have a column for test and a column for part. Once this was created also in and managed in Scheduler, where I have the web report. If I do a test in Scheduler or new data comes in and it's told to print automatically when it sees new data, then I'd have a new entry in CM4D Web in two columns where one always says test for this and another column called part where it would resolve to the routine name in this document here. So those are some of the options for the sheet sets. We'll see this a bit more involved when we look at cases for scheduler, setting up a report in CM4D Web and other modules. But for now, those are most of the main options that exist for sheet sets. And with that, I'd like to thank you for watching this module and look forward to seeing you for the next one.